Hello, welcome to our December 5th, 2023 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you can simply ask your question in the live chat field. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in kind of a real-time manner will soon be eclipsed. So one of the things, if you ask a question and you don't get an immediate response, one of the things, just realize that we will go through all of the questions chronologically. So if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're using, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also, if you could let us know which level of Cubase is, as in version 11, 12, or 13, and if you're running on Mac or Mac OS or Windows, that information is helpful. We should have all of the topics indexed and pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps, so you could quickly use that as a reference to navigate quickly to a particular topic. If you wanted to search for topics, we could go to cubaseindex.com and you could search for topics there. And I think today we will cross over 30,000 different topics that we've covered since kind of COVID started. So we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for that, for his work in creating that website for everyone. We also want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude and Agent K, who serve as moderators. So they're not Steinberg employees. They really just kind of do this out of the goodness of their hearts. So I give special thanks to them. Also, we'll give special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So you could do different searching there. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the U.S. distributor of Steinberg products. And I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching live, or even if you're watching on the replay, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see where people are from around the world. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, so we see Uno Memento from Finland, we see PM O'Sullivan, we see Jazz Dude on, we have Jan from Cubase Index, we have Stefan, who's also from Sweden. All right, we have David Griffiths checking in from Wales. He just says, thanks for your help last week, Greg, so glad to help. We have Soren checking in from Sweden. He says it's time to learn something. We have Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset, UK. Great to see you on again. All right, so we have Sens1 from Phoenix saying hi. We have the artist known as Love from New York, I believe. He wants everyone to hit the like button. All right, we see Benny. This question, I have a question. How do I remove a VST from blacklist, Cubase 13 Pro? So if you see a VST plugin, it's in, I guess it's called the blacklist. But if you go to your studio menu to plugin manager, you can see the blacklist here. And then often what you can do is select the plugin. If it's going to be like a 32-bit plugin, at that point it may not, it may not show up. It may not work, but if it's a VST3 plugin in 64-bit or VST2 if you're on Windows, we can come over here, select the plugin, and then hit the reactivate button. So once again, go to your studio menu to VST plugin manager. You could navigate to the block list tab, and at that point you could just choose to reactivate the particular plugin. So that's how you could do it. All right, wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas, and we have Home Studio World checking in from Jordan. Glad to see you again. All right, so we see from Home Studio World, is there a way to solo band in the EQ included in the vocal chain plugin. So let's take a look. So I'll just go to my inserts here. We'll open up our vocal chain. So let's say, okay, we have EQ1. So I think with this EQ, this particular EQ, that it's going to, I don't think that these bands are soloable. So, as we, but I think we could do it inside of, let's see if we switch to some of the other algorithms, like kind of the Pultec passive EQs. So I don't think that these are, the individual bands are soloable, but if you go to, not within that particular plugin, but I think if you wanted to go to the EQ plugin here, we could say, let's get to frequency. And then as we select a particular band, we could just hear, once we have the auto filters, auto listen for filters, that we could adjust and only hear that particular band. But I don't think that the plugins inside of the vocal chain allow you to solo individual bands. Okay. All right, so we have Minac Banerjee just saying hello. Thanks for being on the live stream today. Okay, so we see from Dallas LaRue, I believe from Las Vegas, get my MIDI remote set up and lose these settings when I open another project. How do you delete scripts and services or connect when disconnected? So I haven't, so when you go to your MIDI remote, so let's say we come over here. So if we wanted to, let's say once we're in our remote, let me just close that. That if you go to the settings, that here you could just choose to disable. So let's say if you go to the scripts, you could disable the controller script right from here. So go to, select the MIDI remote, go to the settings, click on the scripts tab, and then you could disable. So I've always had it in my experience that this is kind of a, you know, these particular scripts are independent of the project. So if I load up a different project, let's say I do a new project, that my MIDI remote settings will be identical. So if I switch this, that these are kind of static. So let's say if I go to selected track, and now we close this project, and let's come back over here, and we'll activate this project. We'll see if those settings are automatically carried over. So I guess it might be the last settings within that particular project. So once you have that done, but again, if you wanted to disable the MIDI remote, click on the settings cogwheel, go to scripts, and then you could disable the controller script or enable it directly from there. All right. C Notes asks, can you please show how to set up key commands to nudge and slip events? Also, I'd like to know slip audio waveforms, if I could slip audio waveforms to grid. Thank you. Okay, so if we wanted to nudge particular events, let me just go ahead and break off just a little portion of this. Okay, so as we nudge, just get my keyboard shortcuts. We can now just hold down the control or command key and hit the left or right arrows to nudge, and we could nudge this based upon our particular resolution. So let's say if we have this set to beat and I move this to start on the beat, that as we nudge, it's going to nudge over the events by beat. So we nudge left, So the event is moving. And if we wanted this to be set by quantize or by bar, so if I move this, we can now just nudge the particular events. Let me make sure I'm at the right keyboard shortcut here. So as we zoom in here, we could just nudge the events just by bar. So again, that's just the left arrow with control held, the right arrow with control or command held, and you could nudge the events. I think within the event, to slip the events, generally this is not necessarily going to be tied to the grid, but how I've always done it is hold down the control or command plus the alt or option, and then you could just go within the particular event and slide the event, but this may not nudge. As you nudge, often you're nudging because something may be like a little bit off rhythmically. So let's say, okay, I wanted to take this particular event and line it up to the grid, that now I could choose to nudge to the and just move it free form. So I don't think that the slipping is tied into the nudging. Like slipping within events is kind of tied into the snap, but when we go to the particular events, you don't have to set up key commands. By default, it'll be the control or command plus the left or right arrows, and it'll nudge based upon bar, beat, or the quantized value. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see from Home Studio World, says, thanks, Greg. When any groove quantized pattern added to the quantized panel, is the beat designer will exactly follow the quantize as it is? Thanks. So, when we have a particular groove, let me just go to a different project here. We could show this. All right, so let's say we have a drum pattern with a groove. Okay, so let's say I like this particular drum pattern. So if we want to open up like the quantized panel, we could take a particular groove and drop it directly in, and now we have our we could see the name of our quantized preset, and then it's and the question is the beat designer will exactly follow groove quantize as it is? Thanks. So the beat designer, when we're utilizing the beat designer, will just come over and let's just open up the beat designer here. So as soon as we turn this on, the beat designer is not going to automatically follow the particular groove, but if you want to take the beat designer pattern here, we could say let's just we're going to insert pattern at the left locator. So let's say we do that. Now all we would have to do is, once it's in the MIDI domain, is we could quantize that based upon this particular groove. So the beat designer will not really allow you to do, it's not going to take the quantized information. It's not going to quantize within beat designer, but the beat designer will have to be quantized directly out to here. So once it's an event, then those events can be quantized. And this just reminds me, last week I had kind of a brain cramp on how to automate. I think it was from Taylor from Music for World Peace Records had asked about automating beat designer patterns, and I had a brain cramp on it. So while I'm here, I just want to go over this. So let's say we have beat designer pattern here. So we'll go ahead and if we had different patterns on different keys, what we could do is all we'd have to do is just go directly to the particular pattern here. And I will I may have to adjust my but once you have I'll just load up a quick pattern here. All right, and let's say we have, and I'm going to just, on this particular kit, I'm going to just load the kit with no patterns. All right. Okay. So now as we would play, and then all we would have to do is we could trigger these patterns from your MIDI controller, and you could switch between so let's see if I just come over here and let's open up maybe my virtual keyboard. That now you could just select the particular event, and then you could switch between the patterns using the MIDI notes once the jump is active here. So let's say we'll jump now, like while it's playing. And then once that's open, you can now just switch. Let me just get the right patterns here. So I'm just hitting my MIDI keyboard, and we could switch. So that's how you could kind of switch between different patterns, is just activate the jump and select the track, and then those MIDI notes will get reassigned to the different patterns. So you could just now record that particular button, and then you could have the particular patterns jump around as you hit the MIDI keyboard. So that's how you could automate and the Beat Designer plugin. All right, so we see Kaiwen Franklin checking in from Florida. So we see the artist known as Love. And his question is, in Nuendo 3, when exporting a video, the color changed. Any reason why? So it could really depend upon the codec that the video was kind of captured in. So maybe if you, and there's lots of different video utilities to kind of switch to different codecs. So I think that you may want to use a ProRes codec for that. So, try switching it to like a ProRes codec, and I think you'll be fine. All right, GS Publishing. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to link the tools in the project and key editor? The last used tool remembered, but I like to alternate between those windows, always with the same tool I'm using at the moment. So no, because there are different tools for each of the editors. So let me just toggle this behavior real quick. So, if you have a tool that's available in the project window, so let's say, like if I have the glue tool selected and I double click and there's no glue tool in this editor, it doesn't make sense to have a straight parity between the tools between the editors, because the tools are different between the project window and the editor. So just to make it consistent, that way, you're not assuming a tool from one screen to another. So. All right, Chandelier Jet asks, I want to upgrade to Cubase 13, but don't have much hard drive space in my content drive. Do you know how much Cubase 13 adds on the old content? So, when you go to the Steinberg download manager, we'll just come over here, or Steinberg download assistant, sorry. There are additional loops and content. There's, 5 gigabytes for Iconicus Sketch. Those could be installed anywhere. The actual program itself, we'll take a look at the size. So we'll say, okay, let's get Cubase 13. So the program itself is 724 megabytes. If you were to get the Iconicus Sketch, it's 4.66 gigabytes, and you have these other content. So from beautiful R&B vocals, that's, the size of these contents, and those could be moved anywhere or not installed if you don't want those particular ones installed. So, but you could see the size in the Steinberg download assistant. All right, so we have Robbie checking in. And Robbie Becky says he's a musical artist based in the countryside of Croatia, and he's released 4 self-made studio albums. Congratulations on that, and thanks for being on the live stream. All right, and we see Reinfried DB from Kleinsedelbach, Germany. Thanks for being on. We see Got Your. Great to see you on. All right, we have the audio engineer from the UK. All right, and we see from Uno Memento that tomorrow is Finland's Independence Day. Happy Independence Day to Finland. I got to sit on an airplane with the ambassador to Finland once from the United States. All right. We see Robbie's just has his 5th album on the way. He will occasionally drop in for questions. All right, wonderful to see Patrick Emanuel A on live. All right, PM O'Sullivan says, in Cubase 13 Pro Windows, I have Waves blacklisted, wasn't before in 13. So C program files, common files, VST3, I guess it's E, maybe Wave Shell, 3.vst313.vst3 VST. And we see that they work in Ableton, same PC, so it must be Cubase related. Tried unblocking. So I'm not sure, if all of your Waves plugins are, if every single Waves plugins is being blacklisted, or if it's just particular ones. And I'm not sure if you're on. I assume that you're, on PC. So, but sometimes, obviously, I have Waves plugins that I use. Just some of the free ones that they've given away in promotions, and they all work on my PC. So if you want to email me, I could do some work, but maybe it's just a reinstallation. Might be able to solve it. Maybe other people could weigh in if they have You know, if they have similar problems with waves, but like I know I just got their Silk Vocal thing that they released in promotion last week, and that's working fine on my Windows system. All right, so we see the hitter asks, what reverb in Cubase would you say is most used amongst professionals? I want to pick one to really learn the in and out of as my go-to. Probably the one that's, you know, most commonly used would go between like two different ones. So it's probably the Reverence, which is a convolution reverb, and browse through many of the different samples. There's lots of great plates in here. So this is basically taking samples of reverbs and then using that, and you could also do very cool stuff like reverse the reverb, and you could import wave files as impulses that you could use directly in there. So convolution reverbs are very powerful for that. There's also for an algorithmic reverb, probably the Revelation is really wonderful sounding. This will also give you the ability to do, you know, cuts on particular frequencies, so you don't have to necessarily EQ your reverb return channel. I was just watching a video recently, I think it was Joel Wanasek, and he was using RoomWorks, which is kind of an older plugin, but he was like, and what he did with it sounded great. But probably the two most common ones are going to be the Reverence, convolution based, and Revelation. So if I had to concentrate on some, those would be the two that I would focus on. All right, Sense One asks, is there a way to sync Splice samples to MediaBay? I have collections made inside Splice, but would rather navigate directly in Cubase, so I'm not having to go back and forth using Cubase 11. So I haven't really worked with Splice personally, so I may not be the best person to answer this. But, you know, in MediaBay, I'm not sure if it's, you know, if the Splice is being seen as if it's being seen through a web browser. But in MediaBay, you could come over here and not only see stuff that's kind of remote on your system, but it can be also on a network. So if you have a network location, so I'm not sure if Splice is, you know, part of their management system is like, you know, where the files aren't directly on your system, but if it's seen on, you know, your particular, a network drive, if you wanted to see that, or if it's on a local drive, MediaBay will see that. But I'm not as familiar with Splice because I haven't experienced using it as a service for loops. But as long as it's available to see on your system, then it is seen. But if it's going to be always in their system until you pay for the loop, or, you know, if you cancel your subscription, that content will disappear, then it may not be seen within MediaBay because it's not resident on a network or your local computer. All right, so we see Peter checking in from his snowy Montreal, where he got dumped on 25 to 30 centimeters of snow. All right. And Uno Memento just says that's normal in Finland. All right, Billy asks, hey Greg, is the sampler in Cubase MPE compatible? And if so, can you show how to change things like the pitch of a note within the piano roll? Let's take a look. I think it is. So let's say if we have a sampler track here. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and just draw in some, let's say I'll just record a chord here real quick. Okay, so if we have this chord, now I want to go into my editor. So one of the things that you could do is we could enable double click to open note expression editor. And here I want to go to my note expression and let's say, okay, I want this to be tuning. So now when I draw in, I'm just going to come. So now we will see if that only that one middle note that we drew in. So now we can just come directly here to this particular note, and as we draw, we can now just have that one particular note, change pitch, while the others stay still. So once you have the MIDI data, there's this little icon here. So there's two different modes. So one mode will allow you when you double click to erase a note, or the other mode will allow you once you click on double click opens the note expression editor. So once you do that, now at this point, we could open up the note expression editor, go to the inspector tab for the editor and pick and choose what parameter you want. So let's say, okay, I want my volume for that note to increase, but I want the pitch of the other note. So, and that's how you, and to see these reflected, you can now just come directly to the particular notes here, and you could see kind of the note expression data or the MPE data just taken into account right there. So, yep, it is. Okay, so we see, hey Greg, is there a way to edit audio via, say, drag and drop within the editor? All right, so let's say, I'll just switch this over to, let's say, definition. Okay, so I'm just going to copy. So I think a lot of times, you know, when we do this, like, you know, we can cut, you know, so the sample editor I think is really intended to just be for particular files. But let's say if we go to our audio menu and we'll say events to part, that now this gives us kind of a secondary editor, and I could say, okay, within this particular event, I want to cut this, and I want to take this part of this editor, come over here, and I'll hold down my Alt or Option key, and I could just make copies. So we could have this as a part, which is kind of a different hierarchy. So we could think of a part could be a collection of events, and now when I move this particular part, all of these events will be moving. Or if we glue multiple events together, so on like multiple audio events like this, now when we double click, we can just see our different events here. I can move that there. Let's swap the order. We can enlarge parts as needed. So in this way, we could just take parts and duplicate. So if I want to come here, even if I just hit Control or Command D, we could duplicate within. So it's very easy to do within a part editor, and we could think of the sample editor as being more attuned to the given content. But if you wanted to be more creative and you know, just come to your audio menu and you could choose to, you know, and choose the events to part, or conversely, you could choose to dissolve parts right here. So you could give that a try. So lots of cool stuff you could do with part editor. All right, we have a question. Hi, Greg. I would like to collaborate offline with a Mac Logic user. My Cubase 13. I tested the satellite plugin. Do not want to exchange files over Dropbox. It's kind of inconvenient. So I haven't worked with the satellite plugin. I'm not familiar with that. So a lot of people, because there isn't necessarily I don't know of a way, maybe the satellite plugin does this. If that's like a bridge to get files back and forth, but doing Dropbox or WeTransfer is pretty common. But maybe if you give, I could do some research on the satellite plugin, but I'm not familiar with it. Okay. Okay, so we see from Billy Goat, I was really happy about being able to send anything to the input of a new track. Can you show how that works and how to record the master output of a session quickly to a new audio track? All right, so with, the master section, so it's really intended for like, okay, I want to take my sampler track. So let's say I was playing this, that I could add an audio track. And then we could set our sampler track. If we come here to track instruments, so let's say, okay, here's my sampler track that now I could record both the audio and MIDI simultaneously. So as soon as we do this, and we place it into record, that we're recording the MIDI and audio at the same time. So that was really kind of the intention to do that, because before we would have to send it to a group or to an output and then use that as the basis for the audio input. Now when dealing with the master output, because this is the very, very last step in the chain, and this is going from the master channel directly to the converters, to the audio interface. There's nowhere to send that back. So if I wanted to take, a particular, file here, let's say I want to take my mix of all of these events and I wanted to render it, probably the fastest way to do it is just to go to export audio mixdown. And then we could just choose, okay, I want my stereo out. And then on the after export, choose create audio track. And then when we export the audio, and we do that between the left and right locators. And now we could have just your particular audio file rendered just like that. So, since the output again is at the very final stage, since that's at this point, the master track is only going out to the interface, to the converters, to the monitoring source, that there's no way to, like you don't see sends on the output, because this is the very final stage of the signal flow. So at that point, just do an export audio mixdown, and again, choose to come over and after export, just create an audio track and choose a stereo out, and that will make it your file right there. All right. All right, so we see Razel from Denmark. His question is there a function in Cubase to control and change the MIDI velocity curve? So, generally, if a lot of times, Cubase is going to accept whatever velocities are in your particular system. So let's say I'll just so a lot of times velocity curves are actually kind of determined more by the particular controller keyboard. But let's say if we wanted to adjust curves for existing notes, if we grab our line tool, and say, okay, I want this to be like a sine wave. We could adjust some of our velocity. Let me just blow this up so we can see the velocities better here. So I think that we could just say, okay, I want to do, a parabola tool to just take the incoming velocities and be able to alter them. So, use some of the line tools. But, like a lot of times your MIDI controller will have, settings for, I want this to be linear. I want this to have more of a sinusoid pattern. But here, if you wanted to do it, so there's nothing in Cubase that kind of does that live. Cubase will accept your particular, what the MIDI controller is transmitting. But we could also just come over here and say, okay, I just want to take, let's say if I have a lot more velocity events here, that we could take our line tool and say, okay, I want my velocities to like be in, different patterns you could have set up as well. So you can just kind of, check out like the parabola tool. So if you come here, once you're in the tool here, you could, take your existing velocities and treat those kind of all the same. So let's say these are all, and if you hold down the Alt or Option key, you could do kind of the opposite direction. So let me know if that's what you want to accomplish, Razel, with that. But generally, a lot of times the controller is where a lot of stuff will kind of be, start from. Okay, so we just see from my NAC, just make sure it's not a beginning part. Sorry, close a window opened up here. All right, so we see trap-like roll hi-hats like triplet. So if you wanted to do rolls for different rhythmic patterns, what you can do is, if you're in the drum editor, here we can say, okay, I want these notes to be entered in as quarter notes. I want this note to be eighth notes, and I want this to be eighth note triplets. So now as I kind of paste in, we could just draw in different rhythmic values. I want to put in 16th note triplets here. So this way, as we kind of paint in, we could paint in based on musical grids. So if you wanted to do different, different rhythmic patterns for different instruments, and you could change that. So say I want to do 16th note triplets here, but I wanted this to be eighth notes going into that. And then before that, I wanted to be 16th notes in this measure. So we could put in, and let's say after that, I want it to be 32nd notes. So we could build up different tension. So even within the same lane, we could put in different rhythmic values. Let me know if that's kind of what you want it to see. All right, so Robbie just says, Greg, could you please tell us a bit about the character tab in the vocal chain? I'm sure a lot of us would like to know what the exciter does. All right, so if we have, let's say we go to the character tab, so you have kind of in the vocal chain, there's going to be like two different tabs. One will be set up as, one will be more for kind of straight characteristics without kind of coloring the particular sound, and then we will have colors, and that's what the character we'll do. So let's see if we come over here to the exciter. So often what the exciter does is it will accentuate kind of different frequencies. Kind of, you know, often what it does is takes kind of the harmonic content. Na, 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 na. So we'll come over here and
I started losing sight my place.
So as
what dimension am I in?
So if you listen to kind of the high end characteristics,
na 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 na.
I'll just take it off the loop here.
I started losing sight my place.
So, and as you start to kind of...
what dimension am I in?
And I'll just take something that hasn't been so processed. So let's go ahead and take this file here. Okay, so let's say we're just taking this file here.
What did you say?
And I'll just bypass all.
You wished it all away, and I'm left here for 1,000 years and a day.
All right, so now we'll go to the exciter.
You were the party, the big event. I was your everything.
We'll just kind of...
now I'm uninvited. I'm on the outside looking in.
So you hear a lot more crisp.
Side up.
You can even see kind of the frequency content here. So it's going to take those harmonics.
It got dark. Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? I'm uninvited.
So that's kind of what it does. So the exciter will often kind of make things brighter. And it was kind of a concept, I think it was originally employed by Aphex that did the aural exciter. It would take the second and third order harmonics and boost those to make tracks sound brighter. It's a way often in the early days to make analog recording sound digital. And now everyone wants the opposite, interestingly enough. Sean Crowley asks, hey Greg, is there any way to have the VSTi panel on the right pane reflect the colors of the channels in the tracks, i.e. bass track is red, can the VSTi reflect that color? So these will often, not reflect the particular color because you may have a particular instrument, that could have, like this one instance has 8 different instruments within it. So there isn't necessarily a way to do this because, the tracks themselves can have the colors. And when you select a particular track, that instrument will get selected. So, as we come over here, say, okay, let's go to the grand. Then the grand is automatically selected here. But it's generally the tracks that are colorized because these can have multiple different sounds coming out of them. But I'll pass it along as a feature suggestion regardless. Wonderful to see John Costigan on from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Glad you could join us today. All right, so we see what's the easiest way to randomize MIDI velocities? Is it possible to do in the drum editor? So let's say we'll come over here. Let's look at, let's say, the velocities of particular notes. I'll just show it in a different project here. Just revert this quickly. So there's probably 3 or 4 different ways of randomizing velocities within the drum editor. Okay, so let's say we have, let's say if we just paint a bunch of notes in here, let's say we'll put them all kind of on the same velocity. So, you know, what's kind of unique about like the the logical editor will allow you to kind of do this on a single note basis. So we come over, let's go to MIDI, to our logical editor, and you could have presets for this. So we'll say, we're going to transform MIDI notes, and we'll say we only want it to be set to that are equal to E1. Okay, and then we want to take their velocity, and then we are going to set to random values, let's say between 80 and 120. So now if we did this right, and we look at just our particular notes here, we're going to take every E1 note and just randomize velocities. Now, if you didn't need it to be isolated to a particular note, you could come over to, let's say, on. So if we wanted to apply this across all notes to randomize velocity of all the notes, we can come over to, we'll select the track. We could go into the, you'll see, you might have to right click setup sections, and you'll see one for MIDI modifiers. So once we're in the MIDI modifiers, you could say we want to randomize velocity between 120 and 70. And this will do it all for playback. So as it's played back, we could do that. But if we go to your MIDI to freeze MIDI modifiers, that we can come over and just see the particular velocity. So we see that once we did that, that the velocity can now be randomized there. So, but probably the logical editor, there's different presets for randomizing velocity already built in. So that's probably the fastest way, and that way you could target it to one specific note as well. Like you just want to randomize hi-hats, stuff like that. All right, so Braxel asks, Greg, why when I import a WAV file into Cubase 12 Pro and play it back, it plays back real slow? So generally what that's going to indicate is that maybe the audio file is at a different sample rate than the particular sample rate of the project. So if you look at an audio file, you could see what the sample rate is. So we're here at 44.1. But if I had a 96K recording and dropped it into this project, it would slow down significantly. So the audio would play back at, let's say if I was at 48K, I played it back at 96K, it would be half the speed, or it would be half the pitch and double the speed. So what I would do is just go to your project menu, go to project setup, and make sure that the sample rate of the project is matching the audio file that you dragged in. All right. Sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so we see from Home Studio World, many thanks, Greg. Please just re-explain solo and mute tracks once. The fast way sometime confused me. Thank you. All right, so let's say we have a particular track. We'll come over here. Let's say we'll do a little classical thing. All right, so let's say if we mute tracks, we don't hear them. So if tracks are muted, we don't hear. But when we solo tracks, click on S, we're only hearing. The other tracks will get muted. Now there's also a way, if you hold down, I think Alt or Option, you can put the tracks into solo defeat, and that way if we solo another track, those won't get muted. And again, so M to mute tracks. And S to solo those tracks, and that mutes the other tracks. And again, you could have Alt or Option plus click on the solo button. That way you could solo, and these tracks won't be affected. By placing in solo defeat, and then to unsolo the solo defeat, hold down Alt or Option and click on it. All right, so we have Mars Monkey Max just saying hi. So welcome to the live stream. Okay, Taxi Williams Music asks, hi Greg, trying to use the chord pad presets in Cubase 13. I see the list in the drop menu, but I'm not able to select the presets. Can you please assist? Okay, so let's come over. All right, so I'm going to activate my chord pads here. So we'll say, okay, let's go and come here to the Rhodes. All right, so say I'm triggering. All right, so now we're playing this, but let's say we want to go to our, so make sure I have the right pattern, the right presets. Trying to use the chord pad presets in Cubase 13. All right, so if we want to go to our different presets, so we see that I have these chords, C, A, 7, D minor, B7, E minor, etc. So let's say I want to load up different, so I just double click and now. And now I have different chord progressions. So load up a different pattern. Now there's also, there's chord pattern presets, but there's also pattern presets. So if I select pattern, now we click on our preset. We can say, let's go to mappable sequences. So let's say, okay, I want to do like a quick Brit pop. So let's say, okay, let's come over here to more piano stuff. So let's say I want maybe more funky. And now if I wanted to, I could just kind of record these right in. Let me just take it out of loop. Sorry about that. All right, so I just want to. And now we've just taken that particular chord pattern, and as we trigger the chord pads, that pattern is played, and now it's as if we played that particular cool little funky piano pattern. So if you want to be, you could have chord pattern presets where these are, think of them as chord progressions, and you could also have pattern presets. So when you click here, and then you could have these patterns work for voicings for piano or guitar. So with typical guitar voicing, if you have an E flat, that would probably be higher of a higher chord voicing than an E natural, because the E is the lowest note on a guitar. So, but not so on piano. So you have different chord voicings that you could switch between. So let me know if that's helpful for getting your chord pad presets. All right, so we have Entree checking in from 5 a.m. in Australia. Thanks for joining us and getting up so early. All right, so we just see trap-like pattern, like triplet and subdivision in Beat Designer. So say if we want to do like a Beat Designer pattern, and so let's go take a look. Okay, so let's say we want to open up our MIDI inserts. I'll just do brand new instance of Beat Designer. So right now you can see that we have this set up for 16ths, but we could also just kind of set it up for different pulses. So you can say, okay, I want this for 24ths. So at this point you can say as we're playing here, all right, so say we'll put on our click. So now if you wanted to let me just put these on, sorry, just get them on, get the right pitches here real quick. So let's say we'll do kick. So now as you would just kind of come over and say, okay, I want to do so, try just kind of starting off where instead of it being 16th for your divisions, try setting it to like 24th, and then you can kind of put in different you can put in different triplet patterns. So you can say this is not the best pattern, but all you have to do is really kind of set up different pulses here, and then you could have a triplet feel. So by default it'll be set to 16, so try working at 24. So just try setting your steps there, and then you can have it set more for a triplet resolution on a grid. All right, so we have Gerald Ely just checking in from California. So thanks for joining us. Hope you're well, from Martinez, California. So you see from PM O'Sullivan, it says all waves are blocklisted. So check just to make sure, like, maybe it's the wave shell that needs to be updated. But let me know if anyone else has run into that, but none of my waves plugins are blocklisted. And also make sure that you have the, VST, make sure that you're running the 64-bit and VST3. It sounds like you did from your previous description. Okay, a question. Is there a way to drag and drop in lanes without it auto-creating a new track before dragging back into lane? All right, so let's give it a shot. All right, so I'm going to add an audio track. All right, so I'm going to drag this to the track. All right, I'm going to open up the lanes. So it looks like once the lanes are open, that you could just drag and drop. So it'll give you kind of a +1 in the lane, just kind of for this particular scenario. So as the lanes are exposed, you could just drag and drop right into particular lanes as you see fit. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to achieve. All right, so we see you had a question on a previous live stream about using SDXC cards on a laptop, so he's having great results. That's good to know. Thanks for sharing. All right, Ryan Thomas asks, estimated date for the Cubase 13 trial. So in years past, it's always been about 4 to 6 weeks. So I think we're at 4 weeks as of like yesterday. So I would imagine probably within a week or two. So. All right, Andy Akanda asks, how do I use EQ to have clean vocals? I don't know how to set it up yet. So one of the things that you could do with vocals, a lot of times with vocal recordings, there could be, like, when you use EQ for cleaning up things, there could be a lot of kind of low end rumble that could often kind of fight against you. So the first thing that a lot of people would do is just to do, like, when we come over here, we'll say, let's do, just a low cut filter, or, so if we wanted to just, again, come over here, we could just choose particular frequencies. So a lot of times here you might have foot noises like plosives on breaths, stuff like this. So the first thing, if you're going to use EQ to clean up vocals, is get rid of a lot of the bottom end. And if we just kind of go to the pre area here, we could turn that on, and then we could just have a low cut filter or a high pass filter, and then kind of get rid of a lot of that. So people often do that for reverbs and for vocals, just because there's not much good in this particular frequency range for the vocal that's going to help in the mix. So that would be like the first thing I would do, to kind of using EQ to clean up vocals. But ideally you'd want to position the mic and have a good mic that complements the singer's voice, so that you don't have to do as much EQ later. All right, inactive user asks, how can I shorten a wave from dragging? Is that possible, or do I need to use the razor tool every time? So all you'd have to do is, if you wanted to shorten the length of this, is grab the bottom right-hand corner, and then you could shorten it. And as we see this, it's kind of shortening it to the grid. If I turn the grid off by hitting the letter J, we could just say, I just want to shorten the audio file this way. So you don't have to use the scissors tool and erase. You could just come right over here, grab the bottom right edge, and shorten you could adjust the length, the end position, or the start position of the file, just like that. Okay, so we see question, where is the first 13 update with the cosmetic fixes coming? Super excited for it to look like 12 again. Give me that silver back. So I don't think it's going to look like 12 again. That's, really significant amount of development that was done with the code, but I think we'll see a maintenance release. I know it's in testing, so I think we'll see it pretty soon. I can't really discuss any particular dates because of non-disclosure agreements. All right. So we see, hi Greg, could you please explain the difference between global settings, average modulation, replace 1 and 2 volume characteristics that can be applied in a track lane? All right, so let's see if we come. So I kind of remember seeing what you're talking about. So let's say in the track lane, so let's say if we go to a particular lane here. All right. All right, so I'm not seeing it in the track lane here. And this from Roland stuff. Maybe if you could just direct me how to get there, because I don't see those in the track lanes. So let me see if we go to automate. But yeah, Roland stuff, if you could tell me exactly how to get to where you're seeing that, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. So if not, let me just take a look, see if it's with MIDI or instrument tracks. Yeah, let me know like where to find that. I remember seeing it at some point, but I don't know how to pull up that particular window. Maybe if you could describe that, I'd be happy to take a look at it. Okay, Dre asks, is there a way to make custom sound packs show up in the MediaBay with artwork images? So I don't know of a way to do that. I think that the intention is when we see kind of the images that you know that these particular content files have all of the tagging for like, root key, as well as, all the character tabs, instruments, the BPM. So what you can do is go to your file browser, and while there isn't necessarily a tab for this, come over to, this computer. You can say, okay, I want to go to documents, and I like, this is where all my particular samples are. At that point, you could right click and add to favorites. And now when you come over here, you could see all of your favorite folders, but it's not necessarily going to have the tags, and these tags represent that all of the metadata that's going to be used within projects, so that the loops will automatically kind of, conform to customer expectations, that all the metadata is, available within the particular loops. All right, so the Pentagon Audio Manufacturers asks, hi Greg, are the new spectral warp algorithms exclusive to the sampler track, or are they available on the audio tracks as well? Thanks. So it's going to be exclusive to the sampler track. So once we go to the sampler, if you're not familiar with this, when we go to audio warp, that there's new spectral, and these are really kind of intended more for sample playback. So, and when we select particular audio files for warping, we're going to be using kind of the elastic algorithms here. So those algorithms are really specific for HALion 7 as well as the sampler track. All right, so we see just, some helpful information from Taxi Williams Music pertaining to the Splice inquiry. Every sample you purchase will be downloaded into a directories folder. Cubase can scan that folder, and it will show up in the MediaBay. Thanks for that. And we see Entree just says he has his Splice loops hosted in the Cubase, inside Cubase, routed from Dropbox, and no issues. All right, so we see Nick is watching from the phone, and he has pressed the like button. So thanks for joining us. Hope you're well. Nick's from Essex in the UK. All right, Dallas LaRue asks, in the pool, can you import another song into the project? What you can do is, if you have another song, so let's say I come here, so let's say I go to this particular project here, and what I could do is, the pools are a collection of all of the audio files used in a particular project. So when you go to our pool window here, what we could do is I want to access these. So I'm going to export, see if it's in here, or we say new library. So I'm going to come over here, and let's say put it into a new folder. Okay, so we'll open, let me just, all right, let me see if I do it from within the pool window. I haven't done this in a long time. me just try the new library route again. Let me just remember how to do this. All right, let's see if it's in the pool. But you can save it as a library, and then the library can be imported into other projects. Maybe it's in the media menu. Let me just... Yeah, but there is a way to kind of save the pool as a library. Let's take a look. It's under export. And then you could open up that particular library, but I'm just having kind of a brain cramp on that. Let me just... Okay, so let me just come over here. Let's go to our pool window. Let's go to media. Then there is the export pool function. So, okay, so right click, export pool. We're going to save this as bicycle. Okay, I'm going to put this on desktop. Sorry about my brain cramp. So again, in the pool window, go to media, to pool or shift P, right click. You want to export the pool. Right here, export pool. And then if we're in a completely different project, what we could do, and people use this for like different sound effects libraries, that you can come over here. Let's say this is now our active project. And we could say, let's open the library. We'll come here to our desktop. And then we have the .npl file. We could now come over here. And now this this pool from this project, we can now have access to and drag and drop those files right in. Sorry about the brain cramp there. All right, so we have a question from Thomas. Says, hello, I get no audio out of auditioning in MediaBay. Everything is working fine audio-wise. This is an isolated incident, but I can't figure it out. It seems like something trivial that I'm missing. So often when you come over and you're auditioning files, this is going to be done through the control room. So if you have... So make sure that you have the control room activated. So we go to your audio connections, and go to your control room. You want to probably set the outputs here to, you want to have a stereo or surround output defined. We want to go to the control room and set your monitor path there. Now, if you have this done in your control room, something that it could be is if we go to the preferences to control rooms, and once again, preferences to control room, you can say use phones channel as preview channel. So if that is selected and I go to audition files, it's now routed through the control room's phones and not through this. So, and that's going to be often used for working with like ambisonic or immersive. So now we go to our media and we audition. We don't hear anything. It looks like it's playing. And why don't we hear anything? And that's because, again, it could be the preferences. Go to under VST to control room and make sure that the use phones channel as preview channel is unchecked. All right, so we see GS Publishing says, is there a way to set middle C as C4, please? If not, do you know if there's any plans to implement that option in the future? Thank you. You know, there's different schools of thought on this, so that, you know, because the, you know, middle C on a piano has 88 notes, but middle C in MIDI, there's 128 notes. So that's why you see a discrepancy. So some companies will have middle C as C3 and some as C4. So, so really, you know, I think Yamaha and Steinberg, you know, both did C3 as middle C, and our companies have chosen C4. So I see from Jazz Dude that it's possible in preferences, but I don't know if it is. All right, we see a question from Thomas. It says, my meters are not clipping in Cubase, but they are clipping slightly in my Clarity M connected to the audio of my UA interface, Cubase 12 Pro master plugin set to minus 0.1 dB. So I'm not sure if there's any gain that's being adjusted by Clarity. So, you know, I don't have a license of Clarity, but, you know, also make sure, you know, to see, and if you could let me know if it's the meters in Cubase or meters in your audio interface as well. And sometimes it could be, if you're doing like a stereo out, you know, some of the meters, you know, possibly could be like a pan law setting. So if you go to Shift plus S to go to the project setup, you know, maybe pan law. But, you know, often in cases like that, I would think that maybe that there's going to be some particular gain adjustment, you know, with the plugin that could be causing it. Okay, so we see, will Steinberg be taking up the new DAW shared file format introduced by S1 and Bitwig? I haven't heard of any plans for it. It's obviously very early with that, but, you know, sometimes when people, you know, have expectations of having, you know, and, you know, Steinberg has done a lot of this over the years without, you know, without being successfully implemented by other companies with, you know, different exchange formats. So we'll see if it is still viable, but we don't necessarily want to have to inhibit our production or features to be compatible with other DAWs that maybe aren't as capable of Cubase for different features. And, you know, if you introduce, you know, features in Cubase, like, you know, that, you know, like, will your VariAudio editing be carried over? Will will your note expression and MIDI 2.0 stuff, will that be carried over? So we'll see if it becomes, you know, more entrenched, but I haven't heard of any plans, but I'm generally not in any of those discussions as well. All right, so we have a question from AWC. Hi, I have multiple HSSE tracks in the mix console, but none in the VST instrument menu. How do I get rid of them? Cubase Artist 11. So generally, if you have, you may not see, often when we see this is when someone imports a MIDI file. And so let's say if we come, you may notice that we'll have, let's just add a rack instrument. So let's say we have like, HALion Sonic SE. So if, you should see them listed here. So I just added a HALion Sonic SE on, or a HALion Sonic on this particular track. So we go to my mix console and we can see that this has been added here. So when we go to our VSTi rack here, how to get rid of it is just to take this and choose no VST instrument. And then as you do that, you could have those tracks just disappear right there. So if you don't, so if you have the MIDI track, if we could delete the track. So let's just come here. Let's say, okay, I remove the selected tracks, but my HALion Sonic may still be there. So, check, but try just coming to here and choosing no VST instrument, or remove the particular track from the project window. All right, so we see from Miha Vasil, there it'll be a Zoom meeting. So there won't be a Zoom meeting today. We did it last Tuesday. So, but usually we do the last live stream of the month. And I think the last live stream of the month with the holidays coming up will be Friday, December 22nd. So if you want to just put that in your calendar, probably the week of Christmas. We won't be doing a live stream, and then I think we will pick it up on January 2nd. So, but the next live stream will be on the next live stream Zoom. The Zoom social meetup will be on the 22nd of December. Okay, so we see from the Ninja Scared, when creating a drum pattern on a single track, sometimes I want to add swing only to the hi-hat. Is that possible? So yeah, so let's say, we have our drum track here. So let's say we'll look at our drums. Okay, so when we do quantizing, so let's say we go to our quantize panel here, and I'm going to set this to 8th note, or we'll set it to 16th notes. Or I'll just paint in some 16th notes here together so we can show. Okay, so let's say we have our 16th notes here on our 2 lanes. So I'm going to hold down Shift and double click. And let's just say we're going to select all of these. So what I want to do is we'll put these to 16th notes, but let's put a swing on it. So we'll say, okay, I want to add 85% swing. So we'll see that now that since I have these notes selected, only those notes are going to be quantized and the other notes won't be affected. So again, it's going to be based upon what is selected. If nothing is selected, then all of the notes will get quantized. But if particular notes are selected, so if I want to apply the quantization to this but not any other note, I could just select those particular notes, and those selected notes will take priority over the other notes on the event. So that's how you could do it. And we see from this Ninja Square, it says, "Thank you, Greg, for all you do." So I'm just glad to help. All right, so we have Gabi Hoyak from Lebanon. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see, is it possible to create a feedback loop? So generally we try to avoid that. So, people will, if we had the software create feedback loops, people would, and, people could ruin their equipment and would try to sue us for ruining their equipment because we had a feedback loop. So generally we don't. We prohibit the ability to create feedback loops intentionally. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. So glad you're on the live stream. All right, and we have Roland Klein checking in from Kalmar, Sweden. Thanks for being on. Great to see Madge Deepers again. Glad you can make it. All right, so we have Timothy Samarin, Cubase 13 Pro from Las Vegas. I have a song, tracks with audio click track and the audio stems, but the tempo varies, and I would like to make it all run at a certain BPM. What is the best way to do that? Okay. All right, let's see if I still have this. All right, so we'll just open up a project, like an audio, like a multi-track file, and we want them all to play back at a particular tempo. Sorry, open the wrong one. Let me just... So let's say I want a track that was fluctuating in tempo to play back in a known tempo. So let's say we're listening to this project. I put on my click track. So no correlation between the two. So I'm going to select something that's kind of rhythmic. Let's say our overhead track. And go to my project menu and we'll select tempo detection. We'll analyze. All right, so we figured out kind of what the tempo is. All right, so now what I want to do is we're going to figure out kind of where our downbeat is in our song. Okay, so this will kind of paint everything at 1/4 meter because we don't assume all music is in 4/4. And now you kind of paint that there. All right, so I'm going to move my signature track and my tempo track to the top. All right, so what I want to do now is we figured out kind of what the tempo map is of the project. I'm going to select all of the events. And we want to, now at this point, go to your audio menu, to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. And what this is doing is it's taking, instead of one static tempo value, it's taking the tempo values of every single beat and embedding that into the project. So we look at our tempo, we see our tempo fluctuating roughly like 139 to 147. So let's say I want this to play back now perfectly steady. So I'm going to deactivate the tempo track and I'm just going to type in 144. So we can see kind of the original tempo track here, and now it's just going to play back perfectly at 144 beats a minute. Or if I wanted to be 156, but now it's perfectly steady. Let's make it 96. And we'll play 120. So once you figure out what the tempo is, select all the events, go to your audio. And you could figure out tempo by doing a tempo detection. Then select the event, go to audio advanced, and say set definition from tempo, and then just take your tempo. Instead of having it follow the original existing tempo, you can do other tempo changes, or you could say, okay, I just want to modify this and I want to speed this section up. So over time. It just kind of speeds up, and then it will settle back down to the original tempo. Or you can say, like this, I just want to take the tempo and make it fluctuate less, and now we're going to go back to our original tempo. So all sorts of great manipulation that you could do with the timing and tempos later. So give that a try, Timothy. All right, so from GS Publishing says, can I lower the velocity of all the black keys on my MIDI keyboard at the input in Cubase? It's a flaw that all the black keys play stronger than the white ones. Thank you. So yeah, you could do that. So let's come over and we'll just go over here. So we could set a logical a input transformer for this. So I'm not sure if it's a flaw of your controller keyboard that's causing that, but let's say we'll come over, activate this project. So let's say we want to decrease them by a value of 20. So let's say on my roads, I'm going to, let's say on this particular track. All right, so what we're going to do is we'll go to our, under routing, we'll activate our, and we can do this globally or apply that to track, what's called an input transformer. So we want to transform, and we're going to say we want to transform notes, and we'll say our subtype, and I'll just do this for 5 notes. Okay, so we're going to say subtype, and that's going to be pitch. All right, and we'll say I want to come over. I think we could say is equal to we'll say note is equal to let's say C sharp. All right, and now I'll say note is equal to, note is equal to. Okay, so we'll say note is equal to A sharp. So now we're going to take every note that is C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp, the black keys. And what do we want to do with those notes? We want to take their velocity and subtract 20. All right, so now as I play in notes, those notes would have a lower velocity on input. So this way we could say we want to transform these particular notes, and I'm going to switch this to notes, and we'll say or. We're going to set this as our Boolean condition. And maybe the first one, I think we'll set to and. So let's say we want this to decrease by 60. So at that point, you could just have those particular notes that are on the black keys decrease in velocity. You could do it by percentage, by particular values, and you could just have it like that and save it as a preset. All right, we see Michael Teens is on the case with his virtual ice cream distribution. All right, so we see Ricardo just says, hi, is there a way to keep or copy hit points even though I'm about to consolidate my edits for mixing, bounce selection, render in place, make stuff permanent? So, the hit points are going to be applied to the audio file. So if you go and apply and do a render in place and create a new audio file, it would have to calculate the hit points for the new audio file itself because that information is tied to the particular file. So I think it's going to be not possible to do that. Just want to check. I see another reference to the preferences, maybe for editing MIDI about C3. I don't know if that was set up, but I don't think it's a preference to change the middle C to C3 to C4. All right, Sam K asks, hello guys, I have Cubase 13 Pro. I can't find a VariAudio section in the inspector. Do you know where I can find it? Thank you for your help. So make sure that you have, it's going to be in, so if we have VariAudio, so let's say we're here, make sure that, if you have the track, if you have the track inspector here, try double clicking on the event and that will turn it into like the sample editor. So you may not see VariAudio when the track is selected, but when you double click on an event to launch the sample editor, then you have the editor inspectors. So if you see definition, audio warp, and VariAudio, but you don't see VariAudio listed here, then right click and go to setup sections. And then you could just make sure that the VariAudio is enabled. But, if you're looking at like the channel inspector, the VariAudio is not going to be there. If you're looking at the channel, like the audio outputs of the track, or you're looking at the channel inspector, it's when you double click and then you go into the editor inspector tab for the sample editor. That's when you'll see the VariAudio. And again, if you don't see it there, right click, go to setup sections. And if you don't see it listed there, then it will just pop up. So give that a try. Let me know how it works out for you. All right. So we see a question from James Warburton Music. Is it possible to lock, record, enable a specific track? Every time I click off my MIDI track onto its audio track to adjust something, it deselects my MIDI track. Okay, so let's say we have, just add an audio track here. So it could be just settings that are set up. So you may have preferences. So let's say we're recording MIDI here, and I'm just recording. And then if you have the preference to select the particular track, it will kind of pop out and then record. So if you have the preference set to, I think if you go to editing, to project, and mix console, you could say enable record on selected audio track. So if that's turned off, let's see what this does. So I'm recording on my HALion Sonic track. All right. And let's say let's try just the enable record on selected MIDI track. So let's see if we set that to, so I have record set. So let's say I'm recording here. And then I select a different track. That doesn't affect the record and enable of the MIDI track. So you could come right over and just go to that preference. So under editing, project and mix console, and you could just disable the enable record on selected MIDI or audio track. I think you would just need to have the MIDI track selected. So as you record data, I could go to an audio track, record enable on other tracks, and then just, let's say we're recording. Select an audio track, you could record there, and this isn't affected. So again, it's just going to be those preferences, editing, project and mix console, and then you could just disable, enable, select, enable record on selected MIDI track, and then that should take care of it for you. So let me know if that works for you. All right, so we have a question from Bradley Bishop. Is there a MIDI controller you would recommend for version 12 Pro? Budget is $500. So, it could matter if, one, you need to have, if you wanted piano feel or synth feel, how many keys you need. So with kind of piano feels, it's really, I would kind of test the particular action and see which one feels better to you. If you're a piano player, some people is like, oh, I love the Roland action, or I love Kawai's action, I love Yamaha's action. So, Yamaha doesn't make a specific MIDI controller, and probably for $500 you may not get an 88 key controller. The NI controllers are very popular. One controller that has kind of caught my eye is the Arturia controllers. I think are really kind of interesting and really well made. The Akai controllers are very popular as well. Check out which controllers can automatically integrate with the MIDI remote. So I know some of the Akai and Novation controllers can do that, but that is worth kind of investigating, if you don't have to rely on other people creating like a MIDI remote map, that could help a lot as well. All right, and we see just probably a follow-up to our question we just went through. It says, also, is it possible to solo record enable a track? Often I select record on and another track, it is selected elsewhere, and it records on both of them. Then I don't want it to. Thanks, Greg. So yeah, I think just that preference I think we covered that. I know this was asked probably almost an hour ago. So, all right. So Michael Teen says, revelation today, Alt on the solo button to keep certain tracks playing. Excellent. All right. All right, Javier Rodriguez asks, hello, what is something that makes Cubase unique and better than other DAWs? So I think that Steinberg as a company is a company that really kind of defines the feature set and comes up and is really kind of the most innovative company. And I think what you see in Cubase ends up in other generations, subsequent generations of other programs, because the thought process and the depth of thought in Cubase are kind of really well executed and done very well. So I think, I don't study the other programs, but I think just like the workflows and it's, just all the different components that you have. And you can make the analogy of, like maybe 20 years ago, we had a GPS unit, we carried an MP3 player, maybe we had a video camera, we had, a cell phone, we had a zip drive to carry files around, but now we could just kind of do everything on a cell phone, and people don't necessarily carry around a separate GPS, a separate MP3 player, a separate video player, a separate this and that. So I think Cubase has taken so many of those different technologies, whether it's virtual instruments, your audio plugins, but the workflow, so that all those different components that we used to have so many different tools are consolidated with a superior workflow. And also, as Michael Teen says, probably the other programs don't have live streams like this where you answer questions for 8 hours a week. All right, so 7-2 asks, hi Greg, how do I slow down the video in a specific sequence using the tempo track or time stretching? So generally we don't do any time stretching to the video. The vast majority of our customers need the video to always play back at the same speed, and they write and change the music to the video, and they don't necessarily do time stretching of the video. So if you need to utilize time stretching a video to do like a special effect, it's probably best to do it in a video editing tool, a video editing solution. And just like you probably don't do your audio in your video program, but Cubase doesn't do time stretching of video. It's really kind of out of scope probably for the typical Cubase user, but there's a lot of tools that could do it. All right, so we see Lauren Gabrice, how to create a preset in HALion 7 from a sound created in the sampler track. Okay, so let's come over here. Let's say I have created this particular sound in the sampler track. So we'll get to my sampler control. So let's say we just have this going on. And I want to migrate this to HALion 7. We'll see these 3 arrows pointing up to the right. And now we'll just say transfer to HALion. And this will now take that particular file. And we now have a HALion program that we could play and save the preset to. So once again, just take the sampler track, click on these 3 little arrows that point up to the right, transfer to instrument, and you could transfer it directly to HALion 7 where you could save it as a preset. All right, so we see just a comment from Taxi Williams Music, says thanks, but it's stuck on default and it will not allow me to select any other chord presets. So let me know if it's these chords. So I'm sorry, let's get to select the chord pads. If it's right here in these particular chords, or if it's in the chord patterns. All right, so we just see Entree just says who wants a feedback loop. So you might be able to kind of simulate feedback loops, maybe an FX modulator, but generally we try to avoid it. All right, and wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. So we see question in Black Valve plugin. The presets are taking a little long to load in comparison to other plugins. What could it be? This plugin is great. All right, so let's take a look and we go to the Black Valve. So we'd find this under Dynamics, the Black Valve, and we click here. So mine just seems to kind of pop up quickly as expected. Make sure that you could go to MediaBay, and let's go to like VST sound. Let me see if it's in there, or we go to factory content, to VST3 presets, to Steinberg media, to black. I think we'll see Black Valve here. So try to also just come here and rescan the disc and see if that will make any of them kind of pop up for your presets there, and see, and just make sure that it's kind of fully scanned. So try that, Tiago, but we're glad that you love the plugin. I think it sounds great too. All right, so Yasmin Baby asks, hi, can you show me how Groove Agent support custom quantization in the pattern editor? So I guess this is in the full Groove Agent. Let's take a look where we have the patterns. Okay, so now that we are in here, we're going to have our patterns. Okay, so here we could set kind of the musical grid. Okay. So I think that, you don't, as you kind of paint stuff in, here we could say, okay, I want my quarter note triplets, and you could draw in kind of different rhythmic patterns if you're so inclined. So let's say, okay, I want this to be, eighth notes. So we can put in kind of, if you just extend this over, but I don't think that there's, so let's say we could, if we program something, it looks like we can come over here and we'll see, I want to quantize this to eighth notes, that we could apply kind of the quantization here. So let's say if we come, and I think that this might be, let's see if we, that you could then apply the quantize just right from there. So here you could set kind of your quantize value, if you wanted to, if you just kind of recorded something in and then choose to quantize, and you could do iterative quantization right there. All right, so we have Pink that says hi, welcome. All right, so we see Pink asks, when will Cubase be available in Linux? So I haven't heard of any plans for that. But sometimes I'm not privy to all discussions, but I haven't heard of any plans for a Linux version of Cubase. All right, so we see kind of a clarification from Roland stuff about the drop down. So sorry, Greg, when asking earlier about the difference between global settings, modulation, replace characteristics, I should have said these are in the part merge modes in the first drop down track lane. All right, so let's. I know I've seen the window you're talking about. I'm just trying to remember how to get to it. Maybe if you could just make sure I'm not. No, I've kind of seen a little drop down menu. Let me just reread. Okay, it just said these are the part merge modes in the first drop down track lane. Yeah, if you want to email me real quick, just a screenshot, I'd be happy to see if I could find it for you. So if you want to send me a quick, Roland stuff, if you want to send me a quick email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, be happy to take a look at it. All right. All right, so the question, how does one create XLM patterns for the chord pad editor? So let's say we have the chord pad here. I'm going to, let's say I select all the pads here. Let's say I want to remove all the chord patterns, and then, we could, I'm not sure what XLM patterns, but if you wanted to come here, we could just make your particular patterns as you select them, and then if you want to just save your particular patterns, you could just kind of come over here. So let me know, I'm not sure what you mean by XLM patterns. Maybe if you could let me know about that. Okay, so Yasmin Baby says, how can I synchronize an audio drum loop in a sampler track with the project tempo in Cubase? Okay, so let's just find the drum loop over here real quick. Then all you'd have to do just make sure I still have my. Okay, so let's say I send this into my sampler track, but all you have to do is put it into audio warp mode, and then you could choose to sync. So you'll see kind of it's a bit subtle, but we see the audio warp. Turn that on, and then you could just choose for it to sync, and that way it will sync to the project tempo. All right, so we see, how do I create custom key switches in HALion 7? Okay, so let's come over. Let's see if we can find one here real quick that might. All right, let me see if I can find. Okay, so maybe. Let's see if this will allow us to do it. All right, so here's kind of, let's say, when we go to look at this particular sound, so we have our samples here. Let's see if I can all right, let's see if we can just make a simple pattern here, or simple patterns. So let's say we want to go to start from scratch. Okay, so we'll come over to say mapping. So let's say we all right, so I think when we go to like make a new layer, I haven't done this in a long time, but I think when we just say new layer, that we can drag the sample to the new layer. right, so let's choose a new layer here. And then once you have this set up, you can try to remember how to do set up the key switch, but you can then just kind of set the key switch between these particular layers. Don't think it's going to be... And then it might be like a mega trig that allows you to set up the key switch. But but that's kind of how you could do it. So sometimes it may be, and I think it might be, just trying to remember, I haven't done this in ages. But once you have, it might be a mega trig that does it. All right, so I think once you select the mega trig, then you go to the sound mapping. That here is where you could set the note on message for the, but I could have it figured out for Friday's live stream, but it's kind of in there. I haven't made a HALion instrument in a while, but I'll have it sorted out for Friday's live stream. All right, Joshua Lee asks, probably off topic, but I'm trying to figure out how to restart a click track in time, mid-song. We had to cut it out live. We used a Prime app from Loop Community. So if you wanted a click track to start in the middle of a song, there's kind of easy way to do this is, let's say we move our left and right locators. So I'm just going to grab the locators and say I want the click track to come in at measure 16 through 48. Once we have our range set, what we could do is if you go to the project menu, and this would be, you could do it as an audio or MIDI and go to signature track. We can say render audio click between locators. And we go to the bottom. Now the click track, we could have no click track at the beginning. And then starting between our areas that we define between the left and right locators, we can now just have a click track that's rendered as audio. You could also render a MIDI if you wanted to, but that way you could have an audio click come in between, in the middle of the particular song. All right, so Rob Robbins asks, Mac Sonoma, Cubase 12, mixed down consistently, has dropouts close to the end of the track. Is anyone else having a similar problem? For some reason, the file will not open in QuickTime, opens in spectral layers. So make sure that all of your plugins are going to be, if you're using third-party plugins, that all those have been kind of set up for Sonoma. Also make sure that you have the latest Sonoma update, because I think 14.11 fixed a lot of issues for different people, but it could be that certain plugins, might have, if you're using third-party plugins, might have to be updated. So for compatibility. All right, so we have Art for Music on, just saying hi to everyone. All right, so we see last question. You've been so helpful, Greg. How do I export XML files from the score editor? Every time I try, it reverts to default. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say I want to export this as an XML. So once I'm in the score editor, I'm going to go to my file menu. Let's choose to export music XML, and we'll just call this cello. And we'll do a new project. We may have to be in the score editor, I think. And let's see if we can import the XML file. And there we are. So it looks like you just export right back in. So it seemed to work kind of as expected, but again, you have to maybe be in the score editor. Okay, Uno Momento wants people to whack the like button. Okay, Ricardo asks, kind of follow-up question on hit points. Is it possible to copy/transfer hit points from one track to another? Okay. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say I have hit points here, so we'll go into so we'll go to hit points. So let's find our hit points here. So we'll just set our threshold. So it's a little more low level amplitude. We'll just maybe try on this. We should have some more. Okay, so let's say I want to take these hit points and apply them to another track. So I think if we go to audio to, might be under hit points, we could, let's get I thought there was a way maybe, all right, let's see what happens if we calculate the hit points from here. All right, so we have that. I thought that there was a way. Let me just try on maybe some another project. See. let's see if I had to have. Okay, so we could copy, we could do it with warp markers. So let's say if we're here, I'm going to, so it might not be hit points, but warp markers. So let's say if I, so let's say if we go to our real-time processing and create warp markers from the hit points, right? Then if I wanted to, we go to audio, and then there is copy warp markers from selected track. And if I select another event here, we could choose to paste. So it's not hit points, but you could convert the hit points to warp markers, which may get you kind of where you want to anyway. And then go to advanced and paste the warp markers on this event. So it's not markers, but the warp markers can be copied and pasted to two different tracks. All right, so we just see just from Entree says every time I try an XLM, maybe XML file, it works anywhere except the chord pattern area. Scalar 2 recognizes it fine. Not sure what's up. So I just see no in the chord patterns. So maybe this is with the presets with the chord pads. So I'm not sure if you're not seeing these, but these, there were some that were added. I'm not sure if you're running 13, but there were some that were added in 13 that weren't in 12. And not sure if you need to use Scalar, if you could use the Scale Assistant inside of Cubase. All right, so we see from Ricardo, can you think of any way to teach VariAudio the results of my work with hit points? The results for midifying an electric bass track with VariAudio are all over the place, but my hit points already would know where each note starts and how many pitched notes there are to begin with. I think that the segments in, like the algorithm for segmenting in VariAudio is going to be independent of hit points, because you may have a note that goes like that, where it's not necessarily going to change hit points, but it's going to change the pitch of that. So that for that it's going to require two different algorithms for hit points versus the segments. But I don't know of a way to kind of tie the two of them together when doing kind of extraction to MIDI. But I've always had pretty good luck, taking bass parts and converting it to MIDI. I'll just try one randomly here. So let's say we'll take just like All right, so we have just kind of baseline going on here. So let's go into VariAudio here quickly. And sometimes, cleaning up segments in VariAudio can make a difference as well. So say we'll come over here. And when you're doing your extraction, also make sure that you have, you can do it with static and no pitch bend data. So your pitch bend could also make a big difference. So let's go ahead and I'll just load up and just instrument here. So let's just go to like HALion Sonic. All right, so we'll just load this up. All right, we'll make sure this is going out. All right, I'll just transpose this up an octave. So, I mean, that seemed to work pretty well. I think so. Let's come over here. We'll just make this even louder. That's just a MIDI bass. From a fretless bass part, it's probably a little out of tune. So, but check when you do the VariAudio about the pitch bend, because that can make a big difference as well. All right, Ricardo also just says, thank you so much for doing these live streams. All right. All right, so we have George Robinson from Atlanta. His question is the best way to keep up with keyboard shortcuts that you program, is it best to highlight it, saved preset when you open a new session? So after a while, like if you force yourself, once you set a key command, like, sometimes like when I'm trying to memorize something or make a mental note, I will, and I'm kind of cursed with a good memory, but sometimes I'll just take like a little mental picture. But if you're doing this in Cubase 13 and in new key commands, you could actually see what key commands were customized in the program. So at this point, you could actually, just see all key commands, the ones that are factory assigned, the ones that have been customized, and the ones that are unassigned. So this can help a lot with trying to remember key commands that you may have set. All right, so we see Jeff Zabelski checking from Chico's as his concerts are finally over, playing oboe and some more swing on his Strat and Fender Champ for over 1,500 people over 2 days. They like it, all those white churchy people. So yeah, I've doing an orchestral concert, my first one in over 30 years. I'm doing on Sunday. So I have like 4 rehearsals this week, but it's been a lot of fun. All right, you see Jeff Zabelski is Smasher number 104. Thank you so much. Appreciate everyone hitting the like button. All right, so sounds like Matt asks, I'm working on producing a track that seems to have been written with some strange key/chord progression issues. I'm hoping to suggest some new chords to the client because it just sounds bad as is and doesn't give the listener a sense of what the vocals should be doing. Can Cubase's chord analyzing suggestions help me out here? I'm on 10.5 Pro. So, what you can do with the chord tracks in Cubase is to just come over here. We'll add, let's say, a chord track. Okay, I guess I have one in here already. So let's say. All right, so let's say, we are here and we have a chord. So let's say we're going D to F. So if you double click on the chord and go to the chord assistant, you could choose based on reference point to the previous chord or previous and next chord. So, and then this will give you, okay, do you want it based on common notes or musical cadences? And musical cadences we could think of as chord patterns. Like, if you're, if you have if you're doing like house of worship music in church where you have kind of the amen, that's like a plagal cadence when you go from the 4 to the 1. A lot of cadences, like in classical music and rock music, you have kind of typical cadences of going 5-1, 5-1 towards the end. So you think cadences as kind of patterns. And you could choose, and here we see plagal, blues, full, half cadence. But you could come over here where you could also choose proximity and just kind of listen to particular chords. So once you kind of click on a chord here, go to the chord assistant and it could give you, based on the circle of fifths, if you go to proximity and go, okay, you go from this chord, and, it's always an interesting thing when you need to communicate to a client and say, these are the typical chords that people will go to from this chord. You go from here all the way out here, and from here to there, and no one can follow these chords because it's a longer path. So, but using the chord assistant, you could definitely come up with new chord ideas for your project and suggest more common progressions and let the person you're working with hear it so that they could understand the harmonies. Right, like Archer says, is there any way to delete notes simply by right-clicking in the piano roll? So no, it's right-clicking in Cubase is always going to be accessing tools. But if you wanted to, you could just simply double-click on notes by default and have those notes deleted, or select notes, hit the delete key or backspace. But right-clicking, and that's just been kind of 35 years of Cubase. Is right-clicking is always context-sensitive tool. So just try double-clicking on a particular note, and then you could just delete notes that way. So I know it's other programs you could right click, but it's not, into Cubase kind of workflows. All right. All right, wonderful to see Bruce Bruton from Simi Valley, California. Thanks. Okay. All right, great, wonderful to see Mark Rabin from Montana. We'll give Stella a big woof. Everyone say woof to Mark's dog, Stella. All right. All right, so we see a question, if you know, Greg, about Cubase. I see remote yesterday for my Android phone, but it wouldn't connect with my phone. So then I bought it for my iPad mini, and it worked fine. So, make sure that you have the, let's see if I don't think I have my phone handy. But yeah, when I got it on my Samsung phone, I had it just connect right away. I don't have my phone within reach. I probably put it somewhere so it'd be quiet and not disturb the live stream. But I didn't have any problems connecting mine. But make sure that you weren't on like your cellular network versus your Wi-Fi network. It would need to be on a Wi-Fi network, and if you're on your cell network, it needs to be on the same network. So maybe that could be it. But I didn't. As soon as it came out for Android, I bought it for myself so I could use it. I probably could have got a free copy, but I didn't have any problems connecting mine to my office, like this computer that we see for live streams, and my personal computer I use in my office. All right, so we see Stefan Carlos Benson just says, is there a way to set a default color of automation line so that no matter what the track color, the automation can be something else? All right, so let's take a look. So let's just come over here. We'll set our lines there. Let's see if there's a preference for this. I'm not sure if there is. I think that this will maintain the same. So it looks like you can, if you just select the automation line, so let's say that this is going to be, let's say this track is red, and if you hold down like Alt or Option, you could select the automation to be different colors if you wanted to. So give that a try, or you could just hold down Alt or Option plus Shift and scroll through colors, and if you wanted it to be pure white, you could do that as well. So give that a try. Great to see you on the live stream. All right, so we see Bruce has a Samsung phone too, and he tried for hours to get it connected. So yeah, I didn't have any problems. Mine just kind of connected right away, but make sure also, I think you need to download if you get to your studio setup. And you probably have this if it, make sure you have the SKI remote. So maybe this wasn't I think you need that for either the Mac, for the iOS or the Android version to work. I could have my phone set up for just now wondering where my phone is. Maybe I left it upstairs, but for Friday's live stream, Bruce, if you want to send me a quick email reminder, I'd be happy to kind of get it so we could show it on on Friday's live stream. All right. Okay, so I think let's move over to some of the questions that were sent in advance. So let me open up my file. Thank you for all the great questions from everyone. If you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you hit the like button. All right, so we see how to separate the snare from the stick in a groove agent pattern when exporting. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll just do new project here. And I think that this is probably on an acoustic agent kit. So let me add an instrument track. We'll just do quick groove agent SE. All right, so let's say we have our pattern pad here. So we'll just slow it down a bit. Okay, so if I drag this over, all right, so when we deal with this, now often when we're working with particular groove agent patterns, so let's say we have this pattern. Let me just, we'll go to our drum map here quickly. Okay, so let's say we have, our kicks, and we have snares, and let's say we have like maybe a rim shot. So let's say in this case we have all right, and I'll just kind of elongate this part and okay, so let's say as this is playing, all right, and let me see if I need to switch this to like a rim shot. Let me see if I could load up, maybe I could load up a different kit with pattern. I bet Simon Phillips probably has rim shots. All right, and let me just make the drum map. All right, so I think often, I'll just jump back to, let's just try to add this real quick. Okay, so here we have some rim shot. right, so let's load that pattern over, and let's say we'll take a different pattern here. Okay, so we have rim shots and samples if I did this right. Okay, so if when we look at these two parts and we want to export them, you know, what's going to happen is if we have our snares going, you know, how Groove Agent often works for the phase relationship on tracks is when we go to edit the particular instrument. So let's say as we go to edit, that you know, we could have kind of the rim shot and snare, but these are coming from the same mic. So often if we take our snare and we go to the mixer, let's see if we come over here, and this could depend on the actual mixer, but so we have our snares. Let's say we have a trigger, piccolo. So let's just listen to, so we have this group. So what you may have to do, you know, because these are kind of going out of the same source. So we could have these grouped together, but all of our snares and the rim shots are going out of the same output, so that when we split this up, we'll say, let's go to my kit mix here, and I want my snares to go out of output 2. I will select this particular event, and we will go to our render in place, and we go to render in place here, and we'll choose just our render in place, and I'll choose the render settings. That as we do this, we hit render, and we'll have kind of the rim shot and the snare, because these are being routed out to the same physical output on the mic to make sure that when you hit the rim shot, that it's going out of the different kits, you know, because it's going out of the same microphones for the phase relationships with, you know, because you're hearing the rim shot in the so we have the rim shot there and the snare, because those are all kind of recorded by the same microphone with maintaining the same relationships. But I think what we can do, if you needed to split it, is to just come over here, take your MIDI recording, so have the event on the project window. Let's come over here, let's dissolve part, separate pitches, and now each of these will be on different pitches. So let's say so if I take these two events here, select them, and let's say we'll render these in place. So we'll go to our render settings. We'll make one event for each of those. That now we could independently render the snare and the rim shot. But why they're kind of coupled together is because they're recorded with the same mic, with the same bleed being captured in all of the other elements. But if you wanted to isolate them, you could physically just, you know, edit the part and copy it down, or just do a dissolve part and then select just those particular parts, and at that point render it. So, all right, so we had a question mailed in. how to disable / enable all tracks at once in a selected folder. Okay, so let's come here. I want to, let's say, add 8 audio tracks. Okay, so I'm going to put all these into a folder. So we'll say move selected tracks to new folder, and then we'll call this, let's say, drums. And I'm going to duplicate this folder, and then we'll call this guitars. Okay, so we have 2 folders with different audio tracks. So let's say I want to take all the tracks in the selected folder and disable them. So I want to come over here, take these tracks, and disable it. So we could just choose disable or enable selected tracks like so. All right, so let's set this up in a project logical editor. We'll come up and say, sorry. Okay, so we'll go to our setup, and we want to say we're going to choose to select files. We're not going to transform, because what we're going to do is to select the files that are within the selected folder. So we'll say our container type is going to be equal to a folder track, and I think we want to do media type. And we want to say that the property is set to the folder is selected, because I don't want this folder. I only want the selected folder. And then we're going to say property is set to parent object is selected. So now if I come and let's say I have both of my folders opened and exposed. So and we want to choose this to OR, I think. All right, so now we've selected all the files in the selected folder. So if we select this and I have this folder selected, we can now select all the files. And even if this folder is closed, so I'll select this folder, hit apply, we only open up and expand a folder, those particular tracks will be selected. So when we want to do this, so let's disable those. So I'm going to come over here, and I think it's under audio, and we could choose disable and enable track. So what I want to do is take this particular folder and disable those particular tracks. So now if we select these, we can enable the selected track. So I'm going to try just on this folder. Now that this is selected, run this same project logical editor, and let's see if it needs to be open first. And then you could just simply select and disable those particular tracks. And with this, let's say it looks like you might need to be open, if that's the case. All right, so let's say we want to unfold selected track first. Okay, so we'll say So now we'll just come here and I'll say folding. All right, so now none of these are selected. If I now unfold it, run this, disable the tracks, and then refold it, that now all those tracks will be disabled. So that's how we could just take all tracks in a selected folder and disable those. So we'll just enable these. So it's close the folder, and now all those tracks are disabled just like that. So I'll go ahead and save it as a preset. All right, next question. Are there any plans for Steinberg to release an Android version of the app that can be used in conjunction with VST Live? So I haven't heard of any plans, but I'll kind of bring it to the attention of the team to see if there's, I'm not sure if there's any development on it. You know, obviously now we have Cubase for Android and we have IC Pro, so they seem to be doing more Android specific tools, but I haven't heard of anything with VST Live, but I'll ask. All right, so we have a question. Greg, would you be so kind as to demonstrate on Tuesday how I can use VST Connect Pro and also someone using Performer to control/trigger a VST instrument and, if possible, effects? Okay, so I'm going to swap out a little controller here. So I tried this before. I think we get this to work on a single computer. All right, so I'm going to, let's open up a quick project here. Okay, we'll try it from scratch here. Okay, so what I want to do is let's open up VST Connect Performer, and this is often run on its own separate program. Okay, so I don't have it open. So let's go ahead and open up VST Connect Performer. Okay, so often, again, this is run on a separate computer. All right, and let's say when I go to my VST Connect, one of the things that you want to do is go to your configuration. I'm just going to choose this to playback out of the built-in audio. So we'll just say the MacBook Pro speakers, and I want this my little nano key controller, so I'm not using this in Cubase. And then you'll see a plugin manager, and one thing too that you may have to do is to actually just kind of click here to activate your VST2 plugins or your VST3 plugins. Once that's done, you may have to restart the program to see your particular plugins. But let's say now I want to do retrolog, so we'll just choose retrolog. So I have that open, and we want to now do a session with someone. So let's say this is the performer perspective, and I'm going to go into Cubase, and let's say, okay, I want to record the virtual instrument and its audio into Cubase. So we're going to go to VST Cloud, and I'm using VST Connect Pro, so I could do this on my own network. So we're going to create a VST Connect scenario, and I'm going to go to back to my performer software over here, and I'm going to just, if you have this on the same network like I have for demonstration purposes, or if you're testing, you don't have to enter in your My Steinberg credentials. You can just right click and we'll say, okay, we're now connected. So we'll come over here, we're going to see our connection. We want to make sure that we have these set up. Okay, so we're going to say, okay, we're going to go to our audio devices here for the instrument. All right, so we have that going on. So when I play my instrument, and I just have that using probably my built-in audio on my Mac. So we'll try to avoid feedback here. All right, so I'm going to add a MIDI track. All right, and for its input, I'm going to choose my VST Connect insert. And, you know, so at this point, we're going to record on both. So I'm going to record the MIDI information and the audio from the instrument in real time here. So we would hit record. And I may not have this set up. So now at this point, so as I've done this, we've now recorded the audio output of the instrument and the MIDI input. So go to, sorry for the annoying delay. So you want to make sure that you have this set up. So go to the settings cogwheel, make sure that you scan your plugins, and that in the configuration that you have your MIDI input. And then when you go to Cubase, you can take the output that's coming from the instrument and then take the input, the MIDI, and record that separately. So you could record both of them at the same time and have it all be completely kind of in time with your existing music performance. So that's how you could record MIDI information from a VST Connect and the audio simultaneously back into Cubase. And I didn't break the space-time continuum, networking my computers together at the same time. All right, let me just go back to a different project here. All right, another question we had was, let's say I import all the tracks into a new project. Many of those tracks have instruments that only play in certain parts of the songs. Is there a way to quickly delete all areas where the instrument is not playing? Maybe a little fade in and fade out in the parts that are not deleted. All right, so let me just jump back. I'll just kind of create a scenario here real quick. All right, so I think this is to deal with live recording. So let's come over. We'll do just a new project, and I just want to input some audio files, and we'll add some space simulating kind of where files are dealing with. Okay, so just drag these. We'll put them all into one track. We'll give them some space between the events. So we'll give it 3 seconds. So let's say now let's say we have recordings and we just have lots of dead silence in the recordings for live recordings, and we wanted to get those cleaned up. So I'm going to go to my audio. Let's bounce to selection. So we look at this particular file. We can see that we'll have space in different areas. So if I wanted to eliminate all of that space between the different areas, all I would have to do is we go to audio, to advanced, and then we will choose detect silence. So here we could analyze the audio. We could set your threshold. So we could say, okay, at minus 13.14. Then we click on process, and now all of the parts of the files that weren't meeting that weren't exceeding that particular threshold have now been eradicated. If we enable the auto fades settings, we could just come over here and have auto fade in and fade outs, so that even if it, caught it, not at a sample, not at a zero crossing, that all of the files would have a short 10 millisecond fade in, fade out at the beginning or end of the section. You don't see it visually, but it does it on playback so that you won't experience lots of pops or clicks. So again, to kind of get rid of all of the dead space, once you have it in, go to your audio menu, to advanced, and choose detect silence. Do the analyze, and then process, and then all of the dead parts of the recording will be gotten rid of. So silence can take just as much hard disk space as relevant audio. All right, so let's jump back to our live questions. And again, you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, so Lauren asks how to create a macro in Cubase that automatically erases the selected range using the range selection. Okay, so let's say I want to delete this particular range. So I don't think you even need a macro for that. So if you have the selected range, just adjust my keyboards here. Hang on just 1 second. All right. All right. So you see how to create a macro that automatically erases the selected range using the range selection tool. So if I have a range selection, just hit the delete key or backspace, and that will automatically delete the particular range. So we can say, okay, I just want to get rid of this, just the backspace, or delete, and that will get rid of the area in the range selection. So again, just come here, select the range, backspace, delete, and it's gone. So let me know if that works for you, Lauren. All right, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, can you please tell of the new version of WaveLab Cast since the sale is still on for a few more days? Thanks. All right, so all you have to do is let's see if I have WaveLab Cast installed. Yeah. All right, so WaveLab Cast is kind of maybe more of someone who's not an audio engineer in their perspective of working, with audio. So when people are dealing with a number of different audio files, what WaveLab Cast is going to do is kind of make it simplified. So you're going to have, okay, I want to do a podcast, I want to do music, I want to, work with different files here. So let's say now I just want to open up a particular file. I'll just insert a file here. So once we have this, instead of having kind of more traditional plug-in interfaces, what we're going to have is, okay, I want to clean the audio. So maybe I want to come here and I have hum, and hum is at 60 cycles. I have noise. I just want to come here. I want to enhance speech. So we'll just come here and say, okay, I just want to have my de-esser. So again, just kind of very simple. It's not like, a perspective of, working with traditional representations of analog outboard gear and plug-in interfaces. It's going to be really, okay, I want to come here and let's make the voice cut through a little more. I want to add reverb. I want to add EQ. I want to add, more lows, mids, highs. I want to have, a maximizer. I want it to have these types of processors. So we can think of it as a wave editor that is going to allow you to do, just very, wave editing for podcasting, for, working with video, and again, not necessarily the super advanced capabilities of WaveLab, where you're really kind of approaching it from a audio engineer perspective, but someone who's not an audio engineer and wants quick, fast, and effective results. So that's kind of what WaveLab Cast is. And check it out on the Cyber Deals promo. So. All right. Okay, so we have Cycling is Awesome asks, hi Greg, how can I duplicate kick one shot so they always start on a beat? When I do with the left mouse click, it will copy multiple times, but not starting on the beat correctly. Okay, so let's say we have just a kick sample. So we'll jump back. All right, so I want... All right, so let's say I want this this file here, and it's going to be, let's say, a short sample, as we see here. So let's say I want this, I'm starting it on beat 3, and what happens a lot of times, if we wanted this to be kind of a 4 on the floor kind of thing, if we duplicate here, we duplicate the length of the file. So if we listen to our click track with this, they aren't really aligned. So instead of kind of duplicating the event, we could see that from here to here is one beat, from there to there is one beat, etc. So I'm going to use the range selection tool, and we'll select one beat. Now I can duplicate the range, and that range will maintain the intervallic time relationship between the events. So now when I can have my kick just automatically be directly on the beat. So again, don't necessarily duplicate based on the range, based on the event. Excuse me, I had to sneeze. All right, so don't do it with the selection tool, because that will, the length of the sample may not be aligned to the grid, but again, select the amount of space with the range tool and then duplicate using the range. So let me know if that helps, makes sense. Okay, so Yasmin Baby asks, is it possible to create a command with your master keyboard MIDI remote to zoom in and out on an event in Cubase? So yeah, so let's say we have this event here. So I want to have my MIDI remote zoom in and out. So let's say sorry about that. All right, so let's go to our MIDI remote here. I'll just switch to a different mapping page. Okay, so I want this button to zoom in. So I'm just going to come here. Let's go to zoom. All right, and now I want this button to zoom out. So now as I do this, we can just hit the keys to zoom in and zoom out. We could also just say, okay, there's also kind of the zoom mem button. So let's say if I'm here, we could say, okay, let's apply the zoom mem button. So I think now if we zoom in here, we could hit that button, and as we are back here, I thought that we could, but yeah, so just that we could just take that. But yeah, so just use your remote control key to again. Okay, so let's set the zoom zap. I think we do this. So if we want like the event to go back to like the zoom, like a pre-done zoom phase, we could do that using the zoom zap as well. And that way we could go to kind of a known zoom state, but just again using under the zoom category, you could zoom in, zoom out, zoom zap, zoom mem as well. So that's how you do it using kind of the remote control, the MIDI remote. So it's very flexible. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski just saying download assistant won't boot up either. Connection to the file server cannot be established. So make sure just in the last week or two, there's a new version of the download assistant. So make sure you've downloaded the latest version of the Steinberg download assistant. All right, so we see question, how to display both RMS and peak levels in the mixer console for each individual track. All right, so let's just jump back here. Sure I got. All right, so as we look at this, you know, I think you have kind of the choice here. You know, we could see the peaks that are being held, and now you know it's much more obvious to see kind of where the actual peak values are here, and you can kind of see the RMS just kind of from the metering, but there's no way of kind of showing both at the same time. But we can kind of see the peaks and the RMS metering. Okay, so we see from Secret Studios, I believe that I was unclear, this is a question about recording MIDI remotely. It says, I'm attempting to allow the guest performer user to trigger VST instruments to be recorded on my computer, which are not on their system. So Jay, when you go to the MIDI track, all you have to do is, like, if you have the VST, let's see if we still have it open. So let's say, you know, all you'd have to do is when you set the MIDI input, load up the virtual instrument on your end, and then all you'd have to do is set the MIDI input to VST Connect Pro, and then that way the MIDI input is going to be going directly to that particular instrument. They may not hear it on their system, so you know if so if they're playing kind of like a piano sound, you have a piano that's being recorded on your end, let them record the audio and MIDI simultaneously, and then you could map it to other instruments. All right, so we see a question: how to slow down an acoustic guitar loop from 100 BPM to 70 BPM without degrading the sound in the sampler track. Okay, so let me just open up another quick project here. Here, maybe I will just... Okay, so let's say I'll have... All right, so I'll create a sampler track for this. So let's say this is kind of original. So I'm going to enable audio warp, and we could just put it into different modes. So let's say we're currently at... So let's say now... So let's say we want it to now... so we'll say sync. I'll slow the tempo down. So that's 30 BPM difference there. So let's go back to our original tempo. So, there are new algorithms. So say down 30 beats a minute. And then we could say, okay, let's try spectral HD. Versus so make sure that you're actually working with, in 13, you have the new algorithms that have kind of really high quality time stretching for real-time time stretching with that. All right. Okay, so we see Rocambolesimilato just says, thank you for your great knowledge and for sharing with us. All right. All right, so we see, Greg, is it possible to collapse grouped mix channels into a folder via a single button via some expand collapsed? So let's say if we have, let me just do a new project here. All right, so we'll add 6 of these. Let's add 4 to a group. Okay, so these 4 tracks are now going out to group 1, and the bottom 2 are going out to stereo out. All right, so let's say we go to our group channel here, and let's say if we go to our mixer. All right, so let's say if we select all right. So just see, let me see if we could do it in the mix console, if we could select what tracks are feeding. Okay, so let's see if we... So I guess you could, let's say if the tracks are going to group 1 and you want to put them into a folder, let's just come and realize that our folders can contain other stuff that doesn't necessarily pass audio. So let's come here and say we want to let's select, we'll say container type is tracks, and we'll say the container, let's say the output is equal to group 01. And then we can choose to, we'll just say new folder. Okay, so let's see, I'll just see if we can select. Okay, so now if I wanted to do this, we could say, so let's say I have this track selected, so I want to take these 4 and put it into a group. So I could just come right over here, and then you could just put all those tracks that are in a group into a folder if you wanted to. All right, so we have a question. How to split to a mono channel when I render a kick MIDI track. All right, all right, so let's say, you know, you could just come over and, so let's say if we have, let me just export like a stereo group real quick, or stereo kick. Okay, so let me just render that out, separate bus. just okay, so let's say we just have our stereo file here. So if this was kick, you know, what you could do is just go to export audio mix down, and we'll say, okay, we want to take our let's say the selected channels. So, and then at this point we could just say, when we do our export as mono downmix, let me just set the range here. And then you could, I just had that selected, armed. So I'll just do this again. So we say export audio mix down, mono down mix. But realize that the instrument itself is actually in stereo. What you're hearing is in stereo the whole time. So it may actually change if you submix it down to mono. But so when you do your export audio mix down, you know, you could just do the export audio mix down and then just choose to do you know, just the mono down mix, and we could choose to import it, create an audio track, and then as you do this, you'll have just your mono file. But again, you know, what you're hearing throughout the whole process is stereo, so it may, you know, change the particular sound in the project. All right, Studio 7 Casimo asks, is it possible to transpose a sample directly in the MediaBay preview before deciding to drag it into the project track? So I think what you could do is maybe not transpose it, but you could have it audition in the project root key. So let's come over and go to the settings here. Let's come over, see if we had the project root key enabled. Okay, so we have the project root key here. All right, so we have that. So if we have this set, so let's go audition some loops. Okay, so let's say we want to, and this is where you get into some of the good stuff with, so let's say we go to Soul Assembly and I want to look for guitar parts. But now if I say, okay, my project is in the key of D, when we go to audition it, that we could, I think we could have this automatically audition in I guess it's not going to audition in. We just check to see if there's one of these options. So we got autoplay, align the beats. Let's see if it's in the full MediaBay. But I know once it's in, we could have it, I think it's going to be So if we have like a loop that if we drag this loop into the project, it'll now transpose, but I don't think we could transpose ahead of time that I know of. So we see Jay from Secret Studio says, "Thank you, Greg. That makes sense. But the sound from the VST won't rack back to them if they trigger to my end from performers. So it's not going to, because realize that you're sending to them and that's delayed from your system. They're going to play the MIDI, and for them to play the MIDI, they're going to need to hear some semblance of the MIDI on their end to play in time rather than doing a loop back to you, back to them. So that way they're kind of playing in MIDI information. You could capture the sound of the instrument. You could capture their MIDI performance, but realize that you can't have it like, it's going to be more disconcerting for the person if they're hearing the instrument played twice because of the round trip latency that's being compensated for. Okay, Stars and Guitars asks, hi Greg, what is the easiest way to extract MIDI from audio without having it create 500 MIDI notes from a melody or perhaps 50 words? What needs to be set regarding pitch, velocity, parameters, etc.? So realize that when you're doing, so I'm not sure if it's like from a vocal, but let's just take a quick look. Let's say we'll jump here. All right, so if you're doing it from VariAudio, so let's say we come over, you can clean up the segments pretty easily here. So let's say, okay.
What did you say?
All right, so what you could do is just kind of within the VariAudio, just if you go to the edges, you could just kind of clean up those segments.
What did you say? You wished it all away, and I'm left here.
So when you see like little segments like this, join those segments together, and that could allow you to edit the particular tuning and the different phrases in a very accurate way, but like when you're doing it for transcription purposes. So when you do this, it'll probably, just kind of go to the edge, and let's just kind of zoom in vertically a bit here. So as you start to work with it, again, just say, okay, these two notes, should be together. Just go to the edge and glue them. And while you may have, this may be a different scheme than what you want for tuning and having control over each little nuance and like different consonants and syllables, that this may be more accurate for MIDI transcription once you come over and choose to extract the MIDI. And once you're here in the MIDI, also choose, you could just say, do no pitch bend data. Experiment with some of these as well, because sometimes it may try to extrapolate the information so that a MIDI source can accurately duplicate the nuances and the little scoops and going in between notes. But sometimes you may not want that for transcription purposes, but you may want it when trying to mimic that performance in MIDI. All right, so Dymo Music, hello. Could you explain how can we select everything including global tracks with the range selection tool, then copy everything global and replace tracks? I have a divided track list. All right, so right now I have a divided track list myself. So if I wanted to take everything, what I would do is probably just quickly turn off the divided track list, hold down, select your range tool, hold down Command or Control plus Shift, move all of the events over here. I'm just going to copy them. All those will be moved. And now we could go back to your project and re-enable the divided track list. So, and then everything has just been kind of copied that way. So, sometimes there's a reason that you wanted a divided track list for editing, doesn't affect that, but you could just temporarily disable the divided track list, copy your parts over, and then not have any concerns with that. So you could just, all the tracks that were in your divided track list, you don't have to manually move it. You can just turn it off and on when you want to do kind of a global copy of the selected range. Okay, so we see Jay from Secret Studio says, sorry, Greg, I wasn't clear. Collapsing mix channels into folder. I mean, in a mix console view to declutter the faders in the same place from a single collapse button. So let's say if we have, sorry for my misunderstanding, but let's say if come here to new project. So let's say we have 32 tracks of audio, okay, so I have these in a folder. Let's say I have these in a folder. These in a folder. Etc. So let's say I'm in my mix console. So if we wanted to just only see particular things in the folder, if you have your visibility tab here, just shift, select, and then you're only seeing items in those particular folders. So just like that, so you can say, okay, I want to see all of this particular folder. I want to see just this folder, so shift, click, and then you could declutter your mix console very easily. And if you want to say, I want to see these 3 folders, but not that folder, we could just simply have that as well. All right. All right, so we see Mark Rabin has to run, so thank you for joining us. Give our best to Stella. All right, so we see Yorgo asks how to create a side chain for a vocal in the mix console. So let's say we wanted a side chain for like on this track to be sidechained from a different source. So we could say and we'll do it in the mix console. So let's go to our inserts. So let's say we'll come over here to our dynamics. Let's add a black valve compressor. So what we want to do is to come over here. We're going to say let's activate the side chain. And we say let's add our side chain input. So you can say, okay, we want channel 6 to be the sidechain input. And then that will do all of the routing. So we can see that our sidechain has now been set up for the insert on this particular channel as well. So that way, so again, just go to the plugin, activate sidechain on the track that you want something sidechained into. Activate that, click on the little setup wheel, choose the track that you want as the sidechain input, and then hit play. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we see from Domini, hi, on the laptop I've installed Cubase 5 with HALion 1 and then Cubase 12 with HALion Sonic 3.5, but there are no presets listed on HALion Sonic interface. Nevertheless, all the sounds are installed. So one of the things with Cubase 12, you probably want to switch over to just HALion Sonic 7 instead of HALion Sonic SE. That's the latest version. And check also just to make sure, all the sounds are installed. But if you go to what's called the Steinberg Library Manager, at this point you could see all of your HALion content and make sure that all of these are showing up. If not, wherever you copied those sound contents to, you could double click and then it will register that particular location so that the content can be linked together with Cubase. But, make sure also, HALion Sonic was replaced with HALion, or HALion Sonic SE 3.5 has been replaced with HALion Sonic, which you could download in the with your Cubase 12 license inside of the Steinberg Download Assistant. All right, so you see Secret Studios says, thank you so much, Greg, for your patience with me today. No problem. That's why we do these live streams, to answer questions. One last question. I've been hearing people recently say convolution reverb should be followed by algorithmic. Why? I don't know of any particular reason why that should be. Sometimes, these workflow thoughts will get, you have to figure out if something makes sense for the project, or if it was someone did something once and it worked for them in a particular project, and that they're going to repeat this workflow process forever and ever, and that's their special trick. And I've seen this from, some of the best studio engineers. I remember years ago when I worked as an assistant in New York City, that, one engineer was very, had to have a very particular Neumann microphone with a, and they knew it by the serial number. And this microphone had to be held upside down. And it was very particular, almost to the point of like specifying which particular mic stand was used. And, it wasn't that it was better that the mic was upside down versus, right side up. But, this engineer had a hit record, and he thought that was the reason, the reason that the record was a hit was because the microphone was held upside down. So, and it wasn't because there was like a really clever, cute video for the song and it was marketed really well and it was a good song. It was only because the microphone was held upside down. So, you could take every bit of advice like that with a grain of salt. But I haven't heard that much in my own workflows. So if it sounds good, it's good. All right, so we'll see if there's any more quick questions. I think we might be at the end of questions. We have just a couple more minutes left. We'll see if there's any last minute questions that sneak in. Again, we will be doing this on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So same time as this one. And if you need to send questions in advance, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Again, our last live stream of the year, I'm planning for December 22nd, so that'll be the last live stream. Maybe we'll have a little Christmas get-together for Zoom. So that should be, Friday, December 22nd, and then I think we're going to resume right on January 2nd. So. All right, so Yorgo says, there's any VU meter from Cubase plugs. So if you go to inside of the Supervision plugin, so let me just jump over the project I'm destroyed. Okay, so let's say, like while we're playing, all you have to do is there's a whole plugin that you could open up under Analysis called Supervision. So once you have supervision, you could come over here, go to signal, and then you can see VU meters. We could see this as VU dBF full scale if you wanted to. And then if you wanted to add more, so you could have like 9 different plugins. So yeah, so just use the supervision plugin, and again, you can find that under Analyzer, and there's all sorts of great metering options available there. All right, and we want to send a special Happy Independence Day to Finland for tomorrow. So in honor of our Finnish attendees, I think that's how you would say it. But Happy Independence Day, Uno. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on. And I think with that, we're just at about time. There's one last minute question. See Grant Nicholas, wonderful to see you on from Baltimore. He says, loves supervision. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. So thank you for spending your morning, evening, afternoon with me, learning more about Cubase and Steinberg products. I appreciate all the wonderful questions, and we do this again on Monday or on Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. If you want questions sent in advance, you can send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And with that, we will see you back on Friday. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll be back in just a couple of days. Thank you very much. Goodbye.